Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Sideline Stories. I'm your host, Naomi Grey, and today I am joined by the sports media maven, Monica McNutt. Monica, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. How's it going?
Oh my gosh, Naomi, thank you for having me. Thank you for that intro. It's still all kind of sinking in.
I know, right? I kind of want a little extra there, but it's much deserved. And you have quite the story to tell, but I want to go back to your college days. You played D1 ball for the Georgetown Hoyas, and you even made an appearance in the Sweet 16. So quite the, nice collegiate career. But at what point did you decide it was time to put the basketball down and start pursuing something else?
Naomi, that's such a great question. I look so fondly back on my days as a student athlete at Georgetown. But I think for women in particular that play sports, you know how difficult it is to make a WNBA roster and team. You also know that the next option, if you want to continue to play ball, is overseas. And I remember very clearly saying, I can't strike while the iron is hot in this media landscape coming off of our Sweet 16 run. If I'm an ocean away, I won't be relevant anymore. And so for me, my goal with basketball was to go to school, get an education, and walk away with it being free 99. So once that was accomplished, I was really eager to try the next thing. And so I would say my junior year of undergrad, I kind of caught the bug for journalism, if I may use that term. And so when I graduated, it was really clear that, all right, this is where I'm now going to pivot and put my energy. I had made so many sacrifices for the game over the course of my career, and they all paid dividends. But I was really eager to check out or figure out what the next chapter for me was going to be.
Yeah, unfortunately for you, you knew exactly what you wanted to do upon graduation. Some people enter that gray area, but you decided to get your master's in broadcast journalism. Was there somebody who advised you to do that? Because that's kind of a leap. Some people say you don't need your master's degree for this industry.
Was there a single person? No, but how I ended up at University of Maryland, Philip Merrill College of Journalism, and specifically the Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism is a funny little story. Coming out of high school, I was acknowledged by the Washington Post as an all-Met athlete, which is, the best high school athletes at the time, student athletes at the time. And then when I finished up at Georgetown, I was also acknowledged as a distinguished all-Met, which is someone from that group of all-Mets in high school that went on to have an impact in their collegiate career. And so I was sitting at that banquet, and I said to the table at the time, LeVar Arrington was still hosting a sports show in the DC area. He was there, a couple other DC area media sports personalities, and George Solomon, who was previously the ombudsman at ESPN and the famed editor at the Washington Post. And I just kind of said to the table, guys, it's great for me to be here, but I'm looking to get into media now. So if we can connect, or you guys have any tips or advice, please let me know. And George Solomon turned to me and said, well, why don't you come check out the journalism program at the University of Maryland? I just took over the Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism. And I'm like, okay, sure. Fast forward, I still call George my journalism fairy godfather to this day, but I earned a fellowship through that program and was able to get my journalism degree, master's, from the University of Maryland. But I knew that I wanted to get into that space, and having interned at NBC4 in DC at the time, I knew that I didn't necessarily have the skill set. And so that fortuitous bounce and encounter with George proved to be faithful in such a positive way, because I still describe my master's as the most meaningful time I've ever spent in a classroom, because it was tools and abilities that I would directly apply to what I wanted to do career-wise. So that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, and then you get your master's, you're probably thinking like, all right, my career about to take off, everything's about to go perfectly, but that wasn't the case for you. Can you talk to me about some of those low moments you experienced trying to get your career off the ground?
I think, Naomi, the first job is the toughest job to land, or that was my experience, and all of our experiences are different. I remember thinking, what? Like, I just finished playing ball, I'm from this area, I got this journalism degree, like, let's go. And I couldn't help but think early in my career, okay, maybe I don't have the look, right? Because here I was with this natural short hair, and this is 2013 when I finished my journalism degree. So it wasn't as popular as it is now, and it still is not necessarily a mainstream look. And so I'm plugging along, like, okay, like my first full-time job, full-time in terms of consistent hours, but technically not full-time, was Prince George's County Community College, or Community Television, excuse me. And then 6 months there, again, another networking event through NABJ. I got an opportunity at what is now WJLA 24 here in DC. It used to be called News Channel 8. And so just plugging along and finding people that believed in me. I thought the first job was the toughest part, Naomi, until I experienced a couple of layoffs. And then the bounce back from the second layoff in particular in and it's crazy because this was only in 2017. Trying to bounce back from that layoff, it took me almost 18 months, close to 2 years. I'm closer to 18 months than 2 years, but it just took a minute to bounce back. And I remember being so frustrated, because at this point, I'm like, I'm not a newbie. Like, I have a good tape. I have experience in this space. I've covered these events. And why can't I get a look? And I had a couple interviews over that span, and they just ultimately didn't bounce my way. So it was really frustrating and maddening to a degree. And I was prepared to go teach English. Like, the bills don't stop because your dreams stop. Like, I was fully prepared to go and accept a full-time English teaching position at a charter school in DC. At the time, I was substitute teaching, so I was familiar. I did really enjoy the kids. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go take this teaching job and I'll do the media thing on the side until it comes back full time. And that very same December, I got a call from Fox Sports to do some women's college basketball. And that sort of was the beginning of the wall starting to tumble in terms of my return back to the space in a full-time capacity. But I wouldn't change a thing. But I truly, truly can relate to those that, are in the gutter of their career trying to navigate.
Yes, and you bounce back in a major way. If you have a television in the United States, you're on it, probably multiple channels. There's no way no one's not watching you. How great does it feel that after everything you overcome, you're reaching this mass audience, and even more importantly, the people that are watching you look like you and look up to you?
So the second part of your question, Naomi, is by far the most powerful and most rewarding part for me. I mean, when young women hit me on social, and it hasn't happened as much lately, which I'm proud of because I think it's becoming normalized. But when young women hit me like, hey, how do your hair? Like, you're on TV, talk to me, explain. Or I love, your energy or your lipstick or your earrings, whatever. It is imperative to me that I leave breadcrumbs for those behind me. And I think sometimes that adds pressure, right? Because you're like, I got to knock this out the park so that the next woman that looks like me is given the benefit of the doubt. But I embrace that pressure. It's the same for me as when I was playing ball. It just means I care. The nerves and the pressure just mean that this is something that I care about and I'm passionate about. So that is by far the biggest piece of this puzzle for me in terms of opening the door for the next women behind me. But at the same time, Naomi, and again, this is why I would not change that layoff. It gave me tremendous perspective. Now, don't get me wrong, sis. The wave is hot right now. Like, we hot. The price going up. You know what I'm saying? Like, hot girl career summer. Let's get it. But at the same time, if tomorrow somebody decided I was no longer it, well, it was fine. I did that. I have gifts, talents, and abilities that will allow me to navigate elsewhere. And again, I am loved. I'm cared for. I can make an impact, and my heart is well taken care of. So I have tremendous perspective on this thing. I'm having so much fun, but it means nothing if it's solely about me. And so I'm thankful that I can move about this space with every intent to network, connect, and again, to leave those breadcrumbs.
Right, and we are kind of touching on the discrepancies that are still in this career, even you having struggles with feeling comfortable wearing your natural hair as a Black woman on TV, even probably some of the coverage you're doing, like the WNBA and women's college sports not getting a bunch of the coverage. What do you think our allies can do to continue to uplift us and push us in the right direction to be a part of that standard that is expected in this industry?
Keep your Black squares, keep your videos, keep your emails that we're here for you, hire and pay.
Yeah.
That's it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's such a unique time that we're in right now, Naomi, in terms of consuming sports and fully acknowledging that these athletes do not want to be told that to shut up and dribble. Like, that is completely dead. And the idea that we try to separate elite athletes and performers from their humanity, right? That has been put at bay, and I think I'm very proud of that. But at the same time, to believe that the summer of 2020 and the global protests surrounding the murder of George Floyd represented a solution and resolution oh, you got it twisted. Like, that's 100% a farce. And I continue to use this analogy. Literally, think of your worst hoarders episode house. All 2020 did was open a door, and maybe I'll give you 2 steps in. Maybe on a good day, we took 2 steps in. But we have not picked up a piece of trash. We have not called in the dumpster. Like, we haven't gotten to it yet. There's so much more that our country needs to do. And so through the lens of sports, and allies particularly in sports, I continue to say, you got to check your biases, because George Floyd, Ma'Khia Bryant, Daunte Wright, none of these things happen in a vacuum. These are mindsets that were allowed to perpetuate and grow, right? So immediately, you got to check your biases. And in my industry in particular, the offices where they call in the shots, there's far more white men than there are candidates of diverse backgrounds, whether that's women, black people, people of color, period, people that identify differently in terms of gender identities or sexual orientation, all that stuff. Like, we have to have a depth of diversity that goes all the way up to leadership. And so for me, some of the mistakes that we see, granted, we're all human, and I think putting on an NCAA tournament in a pandemic was tricky, but the silver lining of COVID is that it exposed some things. And moving forward, they need to be addressed, whether you talk about the discrepancies in the NCAA tournament or our justice system and our policing, right? Like, COVID put some real pressure on things that have been swept under the rug for far too long.
Yeah, and I spoke about what can our allies do, but what can we do to continue to be pushing this narrative and be pushing for whether it's social justice or knocking down walls in our own environments, in our own communities? What work can we do?
I love, and I'm going to mess it up a little bit, but I have the spirit of the quote. Elaine Welteroth, who is one of the hosts on The Talk, in her book, she has a quote that says, when you are operating in spaces that are not designed for you, showing up and being you is an act of resistance, right? That's the spirit of the quote. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. I really need to get that put on my bookshelf, actually, because I love that quote. But the idea that existing and being and showing up authentically is step one, right? Not all of us are called to be, a Tamika Mallory, right? Like, I'm not necessarily out in front of a BLM movement or organizing protests, but when I show up with my short hair, when I show up prepared, and when I show up representing Black people and shattering stereotypes, that's my contribution. And so I think we all can stand to do more listening to one another, because as much as we talk about the Black experience in this country, while there are certainly things that tie us together, it is not a monolithic experience, right? So I need to do more listening, because when we talk about privilege, my parents are still married. I went to private schools. Like, I went to college for free. Like, I have privileges as a Black person too, you know what I mean? And so we all need to do a better job of listening and empathizing and seeing what we can do to improve the situation for the whole, as opposed to individual groups, unless we're talking about groups that have been systemically marginalized in this country.
Absolutely. So you talk about the work that you can do for yourself, that we can do for a community. What work do you feel needs to be done for you to continue your success in the way that it already is folding out?
Oh, Naomi, I feel seen. My mom always says, she used to say it when we were younger, kind of flippantly, because she don't necessarily trust doctors. She's like, they practice it. That's why they call it a medical practice, right? But the more I think about it, doctors are practicing, they're medical practitioners, lawyers are practicing lawyers. We are all practicing something. And so I had a coach tell me one day, you can practice to get better or you can practice to get worse. The time you spend is going to have an impact. You want it to be a positive or negative, right? So I am a practicing journalist. I'm a practicing friend. I'm a practicing daughter, girlfriend, the whole bit. So I think my mandate now is to continue to listen, to bring a perspective of those that are not largely represented and don't get the mainstream attention maybe. So the top of the list for me is to continue to listen so that I can inform, right? I can bring my experiences, but I can also bring that which that I have studied and read up on to the space. And then on a very practical level, I'm trying to get baseball down, because baseball is a little elusive to me. I didn't really grow up watching baseball.
Same, girl. It's a struggle. Baseball and golf, I'd be like, let me look back at them notes real quick.
You can't, like, some sport, we've sat with basketball, obviously I played, like, I've sat with football, like, my friends don't get together to watch baseball, so I can't create this Rolodex of memories and experiences that I don't have. Like, I did go to the Nats parade. Shout out to the Nats when they won the world title.
That's the least you could have done. But Monica, you are such an inspiration, not only to myself, but many women, many even men out here trying to do what you're doing. Keep it up. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Keep putting on for the Black community. We see you, sis. And I'm so happy you had the time to be here with me today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Naomi.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for watching and tuning in. I'll be back next week with some more content. See you then.